I've known you for a while, ever since Elton's book. Your name always seemed to pop up, and
Yeah.
you've always been slightly more under the radar,
That's where I live.
it's you're not
I
necessarily.
live under the radar. I've always lived under the radar. That's what they should have called my book, really, Under the Radar, because that's where I live and I still live.
But you like
Okay,
it. You like it, don't you? Under the
I
radar.
do. I do love Under the Radar. It's my favorite place. It's where I'm the most comfortable. It's like a I'm like a cat who curls up in his little basket.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you, because you were behind some pretty pivotal events that shaped pop music in the 20th century, right? You supplied the Beatles with records, so that must have influenced their songwriting. You were the reason why Elton and John Lennon got together, and you were behind his appearance at Madison Square Garden and all that. So while this was going on, did you ever think that you were making history? Or was this something that wasn't on your mind at all?
Never even occurred to me because I was just doing a job and it was just a day-to-day thing. All of a sudden I'm at Madison Square Garden. All of a sudden I'm dressed as the Queen doing a TV commercial. All of a sudden I'm at Elton shows at Madison Square Garden. I'm doing I'm watching the Beatles sing All You Need Is Love, down I just was there, but I never thought, oh, this is going to make history. I just thought it was a good time.
Right.
I having a good time along with everybody else.
But it must have been a lot of pressure while you were doing this, because I think if I had the job of, masterminding album launches and supervising this and supervising that and working with people with a possible audience of millions of people, I would have gotten stressed. But from what I've read in interviews with you, you seemed like this kind of person that just took it all as it happened. You were pretty relaxed, weren't you? Were you ever stressed?
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, for instance, when I was working on the road with the Rolling Stones for 20 years, there was a lot of pressure before we went out on tour to do the press. And there was a lot of pressure to do album art, album covers and stuff like that. So there was quite a lot of pressure involved. And I did feel that. And especially with the Stones when we were touring, because we had to rehearse in Toronto for 5 weeks before. And those were 18-hour days for me because I used to start at 6 in the morning when England started asking me. Because in those days, when I first started doing the tours with the Stones in 1989, 90, there was no social media. It was faxes. So you were relying on fax machines pouring out stuff and it might not have even been faxes at the beginning. It might have been phone calls, but it was a lot of responsibility. And of course, yes, I did feel quite stressed at times, but I didn't feel like I didn't know what I was doing. I had a handle on what I was doing. I knew what I was doing and I knew how to do it to make it good.
But I mean, working in the middle of all that, because I read this story of, I mean, I knew Elton tried to kill himself before the Dodger Stadium shows. I didn't know you were there. I didn't know his grandmother was like, yeah, whatever, give me my cigarettes, right? So I mean, and from doing that to stopping John Lennon from doing cocaine with David Bowie in a bathroom at the Grammys after party and all that. I mean, this isn't exactly a work environment that most people would handle very well, is it?
No, and it was never that way since from the word go. I mean, I left school at the age of 16 and it started then and it carried on until quite recently in the last few years actually what finally stopped me was the pandemic because we all went underground, and then when I resurfaced, I decided to do a book, which I had never wanted to do. But then during the course of the pandemic, it became kind of obvious to me that maybe now was the time to do it if I was going to do it at all. So I I chose to go down the book road. And I for years I had never wanted to do a book. I just kept saying to people, no, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. So yeah, I mean, it was when I did the book and I started to talk to the ghostwriter. I had a ghostwriter. I suddenly realized what my life had been like, because when you start talking about it, it's almost hardly believable to yourself. You think, oh my God, I don't realize I've done all these things, you know. It was a surprise to me too. But and then when I read it, I thought, my goodness, what a story.
This is, I mean, you're talking about the stories in the book and all the excess, let's say in the 70s, particularly in the 70s, because I think, you know, sometimes, because I was born in the 90s, right? Um, the are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm
Okay,
listening.
yeah. You were frozen for a bit. Uh,
I'm
I,
listening.
I was thinking that maybe the whole rock and roll scene, you know, the American rock and roll scene of the 70s is somehow mythicized in movies and television. But you were there in the middle of it. Was it as crazy as we portray it today?
Yes, every bit,
Right.
because there were a lot of drugs around, and a lot of people were doing a lot of drugs, and it was a very kind of druggy period. You know, it started in the 60s, but then it took off in the 70s, and there was a lot of excess use of drugs, I'm afraid, and I think that made things pretty crazy all round. You know, because wherever you went, there was always coke, a lot. You know, and other drugs, but mostly coke. Everybody got into it. Was a coke frenzy. You know, the people like Fleetwood Mac and Zeppelin and Elton and everybody, you know, everybody was kind of doing lots of coke. So it did make it kind of different.
But you must have dealt with a lot of loss during that period. Not, I'm not talking about the 80s here, but the 70s as well. You know, Keith Moon, Brian Epstein, all these people that sort of killed themselves by overdosing. How did you deal with loss?
Well, it was very bad, you know, because it was Brian Jones.
Brian Jones as well, yeah.
Uh, you know, there was Jim Morrison. You know, they just went on and on and on. Um, why am I having a trouble thinking of the American rock girl singer? What was her name?
Janis Joplin.
Yes, yes, Janice. She went, and when a lot of people went, you know, before their time. Keith Moon went before his time. Brian Epstein went before his time. And then, of course, I had to live through my own particular thing was being a gay man. I was living in New York. I had to live through AIDS, and that was really, really hard. That was a very tough time for me and for anybody who was living in Greenwich Village or San Francisco in the Castro at the time. We were all suffering incredible amounts of loss of young people in ghastly ways. So, you know, it was a mixture of things really, but AIDS was a bad time as well.
Well, with time, you must have looked back and thought, well, did you ever look back and think that you were really close to dying at some point?
Well, yeah, and also I ended up being HIV positive myself many years later, but luckily the medicines here, I've been taking medicine now for 15 years and no difference, you know. But at the time that it was happening, when people were dying, yeah, we were all terrified that we were going to be next, you know. So to go and take a test, I remember I took the first test. The doctor, there was a gay doctor in Greenwich Village, of course, who, you know, all his patients were gay. And he was the first one to raise the alarm and say, you know, watch out, it's going around. And then they gave me a test, and I went on a driving holiday to Vermont. And when I came back, I called up and they said, you're negative. And I said, oh, thank goodness. And they said, you're very lucky because most of the people of our clientele have tested positive. So you knew at that time that probably meant that they were going to die because there was nothing to help them at that time.
How did you deal with success? You were talking in a recent interview, you were talking about John Lennon and his adjustment to success, and you were mentioning that some people adjust to success better than others, and that he became, sort of okay with his life, during the last 5 years with Sean and Yoko living at the Dakota and everything, and that he was crying for help in the song Help and all that. How did you adjust to success? Did it change anything?
For me,
Yes. Personally, you as were you still the same
no,
66?
I tell you what, I always had a group of friends who were everyday friends who had nothing to do with the music business. And luckily, in 1981, I got sober, and I've been sober for 42 years almost now. So I met a lot of people in AA, in Alcoholics Anonymous in New York, and I had a lot of regular friendships. And those friendships and Alcoholics Anonymous kept me grounded.
Right.
You know, when you're sober, when you say no to drugs and stuff, and you change your life and you get sober, you make wonderful new friends, and your life becomes much more grounded. And it always was. I've always been a very grounded person, and that even in the days when I was running around partying and doing everything, I always had a regular life and regular friends. In fact, today on Facebook, I put a picture up of my regular friends because it came in, and I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to post that again. I posted it 5 years ago. I posted it again today. And, I just always had a group of people. I remember I was on a Stones tour, and I think it's in the book. I came back, and I went out for dinner with some friends in New York, and I waited for them to open the car door for me. And they said, Tony, you're home now. We open our own car doors. Because I had been so used to traveling with the Stones and having the doors open and everything when I got in the van to the gig, and leaving the gig to come back to the hotel, all the doors would be open for us. So yeah, I just stayed normal. I just stayed normal as I could. And I'm still like that now. I'm very everyday person, kind of.
So you're saying that the more money you get, the more fame you get, you sort of lose this touch with reality. So the key is to at least.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, you lose your contact with your regular life sometimes, and you have to come. What my therapist in New York called coming home to yourself, and I think in a way, in order to survive excesses and unhappiness, sometimes you find that you're living a life that is not really you. So you have to come home to yourself, to what you are, because that doesn't change. Wherever you grew up and whatever you are is who you are. And sometimes you lose track of that because you go off in a different direction, and it's either through drugs or fame or money, and it takes you away from that. And you have to come back to it, which is why you talk about John with Sean. That's where he came home to himself. And Elton, he's got two boys now, and he loves his boys. He's come home to himself. He loves those boys, and they're lovely boys too, beautiful manners and very sweet. So that's kind of what happens to the survivors. You just realize, hey, let's just be ourselves.
You said you've always been grounded. Do you think that that's one of the things that made you so liked by all the famous people you worked for? Were you
Yeah,
their link to the normal world?
yeah, and also I'm quite funny.
And you have great and you have great taste in clothes. I
I
see.
have, sorry. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But I was very funny, and I made people laugh a lot. In fact, Klaus Voormann, he was a famous musician.
yes,
I don't know whether you know of Klaus.
yeah, I know, I know. He played bass with John Lennon and did the
He
record.
got in touch with me this week, and just to ask how I was out of the blue, boom, boom, boom. Klaus Voormann, he said, I hope you don't mind me bothering you. And I said, no, I don't mind. And he said to me, are you still as funny as you always were? And I said, Probably Klaus. I said, I don't think things have changed much. But I remember once I went down to George Harrison's house for the weekend, and we all started drinking mimosas, champagne and orange juice in the morning. And then
Okay.
all of a sudden, there's this jam session going on in the living room with Eric Clapton and someone from Procol Harum and Klaus and George and everything. I was so tired from the night before, I fell asleep on the sofa. Fell asleep. And when I woke up, Klaus said to me, "Oh, there you are, the life and death of a party." And I reminded Klaus of that the other day. And I said, you want, he said, are you still around? How are you? And I said, I often think of that line that you came out with. And I told him, and he said, sounds like a good title for a book. I said, well, it's a line that I've used quite a lot over the years.
Well, about the title of a book, because we're mentioning it. Tell me a bit about the title, The Tastemaker. Was this the first title that you had in mind when you?
No, it was a publisher's Faber. It was a Faber and Faber wanted to call it the Kingmaker,
Okay.
and I said absolutely not, for two reasons. First off, Trump is called the Kingmaker.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Trump is known as the Kingmaker because he always backing politicians,
Okay.
but he's called the Kingmaker. And also, I said to Faber and Faber, I didn't make these people; they were made. I just came along and helped them, but I wasn't making them. I didn't make John Lennon who he was. He was there. I didn't make Elton who he was. And then they came back with the Tastemaker, mainly because Elton's always said that I've had the best taste, and he always says that he's always admires my taste in clothing and also in when I do art direction for his albums, like the Diving Board, which was my favorite one. I love doing that one. That's really an elegant one. But so Faber and Faber said, "How about the Tastemaker?" And I said, "Well, that's as good as any." And also, it's catchy. I
Yeah.
wanted something that was a catchy title.
Yeah. When Reginald, because he wasn't even called Elton, when Reginald first saw you, I mean, he was quoted, I think, in GQ or The Guardian recently that he was, pretty much flabbergasted by your taste and
Yeah,
his
he
style.
was. He was. I was a bit of an exotic creature at that time, floating around Dick James music with my scarves flying behind me and my streaked hair and my velvet trousers and everything. And Elton used to think I was like someone from another planet. He
Yeah,
he was quite inspired by me, he
yeah,
said.
yeah. He said that you would draw attention even during a Martian invasion, didn't he?
That's what he said, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know about that. But anyway, I was quite the clothes horse at that time.
Well, you didn't make these people, but you certainly influenced them in some way or another.
Yeah, I think so. I like to think, even when I worked with the Stones, I was always sensible and kept things good. In fact, after the last tour that I did, the Bigger Bang tour, Mick gave me a note, gave me a lovely brooch because he knows I wear brooches, and he gave me this beautiful brooch of this dragon with a sapphire in it. It's in the other room on a jacket. I could show it to you if you want me to get it out. But he gave me this lovely brooch and a lovely note with it that said, "Thanks for keeping things right." I thought that was very nice to say. Keeping things right is sums it up, doesn't it?
So if you were to describe what you're doing, is you're pretty much keeping things right.
Keeping things right. Yeah, I did the press, did everything, and I kept it right. And so he always trusted me because I kept it right. And so, when we were doing press plans, we used to do them together. And he was, of course, brilliant at things. But I always kept things running smoothly and on time and tidy and as much as I could. Sometimes it would go off piste a little bit, but most of the time I was pretty organized and I kept things organized, but there was a lot of responsibility attached to that. But that's the way I am. That's the way I run my home. My home is organized. If I turn this around here, you'll see where all my vinyl is and pictures and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I see a
Yeah.
photo, the photo of you and John.
And then there's Mick and Tina at Live Aid up there. I got
Right.
them to take that photo at Live Aid. And there's John Lennon at the back there, at the top. And then there's the collage above the door that's John and Yoko did for me. That's all signed on the back by John and Yoko. And there's a couple of gold records there, the John gold records, you know. There's a lot of stuff here in this room. This is a souvenir room. There's so much in here, you know. I'm just trying to
And
avoid that. See, it's all full of photos and things and stuff, you know.
you also
Anyway,
have this Andy Warhol painting that was given to you by John, don't you?
yeah, that's in the other room. That's in the living room on the wall.
You got this started working in the music business in 1958, right?
Yeah,
And I mean, looking back, this was what were you, 16 at the time?
I was 16 when I started work on March the 17th, 1958, and I was 16 on March the 14th on the Friday, and I started work on the Monday.
So you were practically 15.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. So I mean, looking back at that time, that was a completely different world, wasn't it? To put that responsibility of on a 16-year-old, 18-year-old. The Rolling Stone manager was like 18 at the time. Andrew.
Yeah, well, I when in 1958 it was just about Elvis Presley and rock and roll. That's why I started in the music business, because I was so devoted to Elvis Presley. I was a huge Elvis Presley fan, and I like rock and roll. I love Little Richard and Fats Domino and Jerry Lee Lewis and all American. And I collected American rock and roll, and even doo-wop. You know, Come Go With Me by the Del Vikings, maybe by the Chantels, all the doo-wop records. You know, I love the 50s. I love dancing. I like going out dancing. I was a rock and roll boy straight away. You know, I love to dance. I like fashion. So I was off to the races. Once I started work, there was no stopping me. Whoosh, I went.
It's just crazy because even at a young age, you were picking up the Ronettes from the airport, and you weren't even 20. Were you 20 when you were doing that?
I was 19, I think.
That's crazy. You know, you were
I
very
know, but tell me about it, especially when I got told what I was supposed to do by Tony Hall. Oh, I want you to go out to the airport today and meet the Ronettes. Oh, okay, yeah, fine. Taxi. I was late that day because there was a traffic jam. And when I got there, I was so worried about them. And then I saw them sitting outside waiting for me on a bench, and they all had the hair up to here, and their legs all going in the same direction. You know, like women sit with their legs going like
yeah.
that. There was these three pairs of legs all going in the same direction. And I said, "Hi, I'm Tony. I'm meant to look after you." And Ronnie in her book said that I was given the job of looking after them and making sure they had a good time. And she said he took his job very seriously. We had a great time. I love the Ronettes. They were so much fun.
You have this story that I knew. Well, this is a pretty sad but very heartwarming story about you delivering a Christmas present from Freddie to Elton, a Henry
Yeah.
Scott Tuke painting. I knew the story, but it wasn't until I read Elton's, book that I came across your name, and you were the person that brought the painting to Elton from Freddie.
Well, Freddie gave it to me before he died in this lovely pillowcase kind of thing. And he said to me, make sure that Elton gets this for me, will you? And I said, yeah, because he knew he was going to go. It was
Yeah.
the end. He knew it was the end. And he just said to me, would you make sure that Elton gets this? So I said, of course. So on Christmas Day, I was down at Elton's. And I said, I've got a special present for you. And I gave it to him. And he started crying straight away, of course. You know, this is just beautiful painting. And by a painter that Elton collected. And he just started crying, of course, as did we all. It was such a sad moment. And it was so beautiful of Freddie to have thought of him in that way, to leave him this lovely painting to remember him by.
Yeah, that tells a lot about Freddie and his personality and his care for his friends, doesn't it?
He was an extraordinary, exceptional gentleman, Freddie. And I loved him. And he used to do things that really I loved. You know, he loved to have Sunday lunch and have all his friends over for a proper roast beef English Sunday lunch. He loved doing that. And he just liked, well, he was someone who liked a grounded life too. He had all the madness of being Freddie, but then at the end, sadly, he just was at home all the time. But he liked that. He liked home. He liked having, as I say, he used to love having Sunday lunches, and he was a lovely, dear person. You know, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching about him, but he was an extraordinarily nice and rather noble person.
Now that you've written your book, is there anything that you would have done in a different way?
No,
Nothing.
no, no. I'm all right. Good to question. Let me just rattle through. No, no. It's all as it's meant to be. There's nothing into it. I mean, no. There were things that happened I wish hadn't happened. I wish AIDS hadn't happened. um, but no, I can't think of anything I've done, any place I've lived, any people I've dealt with or anything. No, you know, maybe I was a bit too promiscuous at one time in my life. I look upon that now and I think, well, why did I have to be so promiscuous? But that was just what it was like at the time. There was a time where people were taking a lot of drugs and being very, very promiscuous, you know. So, and now I'm not. I'm too old to be. But I look back on that period and maybe have one or two regrets, but not really, you know. Life is life and I've lived it.
Now that the pandemic is well diminished, let's put it that way. What are you up to? The
Well,
Elton is back on the road
no, I'm retired now.
completely.
That's it. Well,
That,
after the book, I'm working on promoting the book. And once that's over with, I'm a retired person. I don't have anything left to do, you know. I'm 81 next month, you know, so maybe it's time there was a wonderful song by a blues artist called Chuck Willis. You have to look it up. I don't want to hang up. I just want to hang up. I don't want to hang up my rock and roll shoes. It's called by Chuck Willis. But I think I've got to hang up my rock and roll shoes.
well, you've lived. I mean, some people would love to have lived even 5% of the things that you've witnessed and seen and done. So you've lived a life like to the fullest.
I have. I realized that once I got the book and I read it, I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done?
And
I
and
really have. I really did live it to the full. I really did. So
and
I'm proud of myself for that.
if the young teenager that I mean the young Tony King working at the vinyl store would have seen all the career that you've built afterwards, I mean, he would have been proud, wouldn't he?
He would, and he wouldn't have believed it. I mean, my big ambition when I was a teenager was to go to America. So to actually live in America for nearly 20 years was really special. So I love living in America, but would I want to live there now? No, not really. I'm quite happy in London. I'm quite happy with my flat here in Primrose Hill, and it suits my life. I don't want to be living in New York now. New York was fun while it was fun. I love going to Studio 54. I love going dancing. I was a big disco boy. I loved all that. Loved all that. You know, but now I like it here. I've got a park next door. I've got a nice little village around the corner for shopping. I'm happy.
Well, it was great talking to you.
Well, great talking to you too. I hope I've given you enough for your
Oh, definitely.
good.
Definitely. Yeah, it was great to talk and it was great to chat. It was great to meet you again. I've known you for a while, ever since Elton's book. Your name always seemed to pop up,
Yeah.
and you've always been slightly more under the radar,
That's where I live.
It's you're not
I
necessarily.
live under the radar. I've always lived under the radar. That's what they should have called my book, really, Under the Radar, because that's where I live and I still live.
But you like
Okay,
it. You like it, don't you? Under the
I
radar.
do. I do love Under the Radar. It's my favorite place. It's where I'm the most comfortable. It's like a I'm like a cat who curls up in his little basket, you know.
Well,
That's
I
my
can't wait.
boss.
I can't wait to get your book and to
Okay.
read it. And it was great chatting with you. It was great meeting you. And
And I hope all your listeners who are listening, I hope you enjoy this. I did my best to keep you entertained and I hope you like it. Okay.